All right, guys. Well, welcome. I'm looking. We've got some folks hopping on here. So it is straight up noon, and I'm not always the most prompt person, but I'm surrounded by good people who are prompt. So if you are joining us, thank you. Welcome to Wayfind Marketing Live. Today is our we launched last week, but this is really kind of the first, we'll say, official launch. And today we're going to be talking about navigating business. And really the whole idea of this is we want to share some ideas and just try to encourage folks. Just with where everything is right now, things are changing by the hour. Running, owning, leading a business or a nonprofit is really challenging. It's challenging on good days. But now it's even more challenging, and it can be overwhelming. And so today we're going to be talking with Bob Willumsen, his company is Potential to Results, and he is an executive coach with the John Maxwell Team. And Laurie, I'm really excited about having Bob on here. I've known Bob for several years, and so I consider him a good friend. And man, he's sharp. And so we'll bring him on here in just a minute. Let me introduce myself. My name is Steve Phipps. I'm the president, the owner, and the founder of Wayfind Marketing. And we work with small businesses, specifically with marketing and messaging and websites. But man, I love helping small businesses. And this is just one way that we want to try to do that. And so Laurie Walters is my co-host. Laurie, why don't you just tell a little bit about you and what you do?
Sure. So at Wayfind Marketing, I am a content creator, and I help our clients come up with all manner of content, copy, articles, whatever they need. If it needs to be written down or created for social media, I'm helping with that.
So Laurie's been a part of the team almost since day one, went to college together, and so glad to have her on here as well. Depending on where you're watching this, so you could be watching this on our website, wayfindmarketing.com/live. You might be watching this on Facebook or on YouTube. If you're on YouTube or Facebook, feel free to add some comments if you have questions. Sally, see you out there. Glad you're joining us. So feel free to ask those questions as we go through this. We want this to be interactive. We want to have fun. We want this to be beneficial. And so what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and bring Bob in here in just a minute. So just give a little bit of a preview. As I mentioned, Bob is an executive coach, and he has the opportunity to work with Fortune 500 executives. He works with ministry and nonprofit leaders, and his background, which he'll talk a little bit more about, is really it's a great mix because he has this corporate executive experience. He was a healthcare executive, and then he went into pastoral ministry for several years with the church here in Memphis, and a couple years ago went back into the business world in this executive coach role. So I'm gonna go ahead and welcome Bob in. Hey, Bob, how are you?
Hey, Steve. Hey, Laurie.
Hey.
Bob, I was just giving a brief intro, which I think you heard. So, man, thanks for being on here. I'm really excited to have you on here. Kind of our inaugural. I don't even know if I'm saying that word right. Laurie, you're the wordsmith. So. So, Bob, why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll transition into our topic at hand, which is how to grow through coronavirus.
Yeah, great. Bob Willumsen. I am a husband and a father, and working home and having plenty of family time, like so many of us are. But I'm an executive coach. My gift and my passion is to help leaders just become really good leaders of themselves and the people around them. And I love to support through that process. I kind of sometimes think about the movie Hitch. If everyone's, he's kind of behind the scenes and help making a few things happen. And so I love keeping myself in the back pocket of leaders and being a place to help them, become the most effective, very best version of themselves. And so sort of what I've kind of settled into. Started out as a hospital executive, moved here in 2004, was the COO at St. Francis Bartlett. Followed a call from there into pastoral ministry, worked there for 8 years. And at the end of that, I realized that I was spending the majority of my time coaching business leaders. And so then just kind of that turned into a business and started doing that full time and launched out 4.5 years ago to do this.
Okay. Well, Bob, you've got a unique mix of experiences and of course, you and I meet monthly, and I know your heart for people and you have that genuine desire. And so, about a little over a week ago, of course, coronavirus and COVID-19, it's all over the news. It's pretty much what everybody's talking about. But I guess a little over a week ago, you wrote an article that I think has been shared 100+ times. So it's gone viral, and it was, talking about 4 ways to kind of make the best of coronavirus. So what led you to write that article? Why don't you tell us a little bit about what led you to write it, the response you've had from that, and then we'll dive in a little bit more with some of the specifics that you talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems that I try to write a blog and spend a lot of time on it and have some success, but this is something I just felt compelled to write over a lunch hour and threw it together, put it out there in about 30 minutes. I just felt led to do it because I saw two different sides at this point. One side was just sort of mocking this whole thing that was coming. I guess it was still far enough away from us. And the other side was in sheer panic, right? Just kind of shrinking back from life. And so I kind of felt the need to center or create another opportunity, another alternative to those two approaches.
What sort of response have you had to that post?
Yeah, I have received a lot of feedback saying, thank you so much. It was a great perspective shift. So often people are focusing on what they're about to lose or what they have at risk instead of what they have control over. And so it's at that place where I start to lose certainty. If I have ambiguity or uncertainty, that creates anxiety. And then I can either go and start playing defense at that point, or I can start being proactive to make the most out of the situation.
Okay. Yeah. In that article, you talk a lot about certainty and anxiety, and how do you see that connect? Because I know right now, we all like certainty. We like that sense of control. We like that idea that when I wake up in the morning and I know what's going to happen, at least for the most part. And so now that's really for most of us has been obliterated. What do you say to people that would say, Bob, I get that, but how do I find certainty with what's going on right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll let you know when I really figure that out. How's that? Because I'm in the middle of this uncertainty and have my anxious mornings myself. If anyone else is awakened at 4 a.m. when they normally don't, right? So
that was my wake up time today.
Thinking about things.
Kind of help with that.
Thinking about things. Only God is certain. And two types of people that might listen to this, people of faith and not people of faith. But even for people of faith, great, God is certain. But how do I live that out practically, right? Like, just don't worry about a thing. God's got this. Doesn't help all the time. We without living out our faith, it doesn't make much sense. So I think you have to focus on what you can make certain. When the things that are typically certain and we get our sort of emotional needs met from that certainty, when that goes away, we have to get creative in how we create certainty in our life to not let anxiety be the overwhelming force.
Would you mind, Bob, just real quick, recapping those 4 points for
Sure.
our viewers, listeners who may not have had a chance to see this article?
Absolutely. So it's, again, from shifting the focus from what I don't have control over to what I do have control over, and from the perspective of growing, right? Winston Churchill said, never let a good crisis go to waste, right? And so I think if that's our response, okay, how can I grow through this? How will I be stronger on the other side? How can I become better? How can I, improve through this? How can I use this to my advantage? Is when it comes to mindset, a really helpful, practical mindset. Because if God's in this, which he has to be sovereign, okay, God, what are you doing? What might you be able to do in my life and my business? How can you make us better through it? So the first point is just practicing empathy. I see people, a lot fewer people are mocking this now from when I wrote the article, but still it's that way. I see posts of people loving this time with their family, and I see posts of small business owners, literally their revenue has gone to zero in the course of a week. And so, can these things coexist? I think we have to have empathy and be able to say, hey, I need to be able to worry about what happens to somebody whose revenue goes away 100%. But I also need to have empathy on somebody and understand and try to meet people where they are who actually have a little extra time with their family. There's no point in putting those two sides against each other. The second one.
Well, and hey, Bob, if I can just jump in there for a quick second about the whole empathy point, because I think that's a really good point. Because right now, business owners, marketers, salespeople, leaders are, I think we've got three different camps of people. And I love y'all's perspective on this, but I think we have one camp. We have folks whose businesses are pretty much shut down. And when the government says you can't work or certain things need to close down, that's beyond their control. So we have some folks there. We have other people on the other end who their businesses are highly in demand. I mean, that's why Amazon's hiring 100,000 people, Kroger, Walmart. I mean, lots of places are hiring to try to keep up with this all of a sudden it's one industry goes down, another just skyrockets. And then there are a bunch of us that are in the middle who were feeling the impact, some more than others. And so I think it is especially important, whatever our role is in interacting with other people. As a marketer, there's a lot of question about how do I communicate? How do I do that empathetically? And really, I think what you said is super important for us to keep in mind. I think I may have shared with you about a week ago, I get an email from somebody and it was the intentions were good, but the subject line was "shut up about Corona." And, that's not what we need right now, because to your point, I mean, and you mentioned this in your article, Bob, but we're going to feel the impact of this one way or another. And it might be physically. Some people are going to come down with this. Other people are going to feel the financial impact. And of course, there's an emotional impact. How many of us, like you've already said, are waking up early, anxious? And so I think that empathy right now with our customers, with our potential customers, with our vendors, our team, our friends, empathy has got to be, it's got to be there.
Yeah. But that's even harder, right? When I'm in crisis, I'm focused on my own problem.
Yeah.
But there's that thing to where I almost have to sit back and try to say, how can I, meet other people where they are, or literally take the time to think about that, to take the focus off of ourselves, onto them, for sure. So.
And so a point that I want to make sure we come back to, I want to let you get through your remaining 3 points, but I want to make sure that we come back to something you just said, and it was more implied, but that's this idea of pivoting, because we're all adjusting, and we do that with empathy. And so let's make sure that we come back to that. But sure. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah. So 2 is just the second point was, how do you make the most of this? Is just evaluate the simplicity or complexity of your life. When times are good, we have a tendency to accumulate extra baggage and some things, and all of a sudden things change, and margins get lean and, debts are out there. And it kind of can just help us get a real perspective of how volatile and how fragile we can be, right? In our businesses or how we run them. And this is the hard thing, not to create regret for people or say, man, woulda, coulda, shoulda, but to say, can you say, okay, if this is doing this to me now this is pretty catastrophic, right? But what can I do to run a business a little different moving forward, so I'm a little more insulated from some of these things, or I've got a little extra cushion, or maybe my life isn't so complicated. We talked about, I don't know how many parents they're running constantly, and now everybody's home. And so one of the things I wrote in the article was, take some time to figure out what it is like, what it feels like to not have to be somewhere 24/7. And maybe on the other end of this coronavirus, people come out and say, you know what, we don't want to have a dozen activities a week again. We each want one each. I think that is a good opportunity for this to sort of prune our lives, if I can say that. I don't want to be, we wouldn't ask for it, but that's one way we can make the most of it. So. Mm-hmm. The third point was just strengthening important relationships. It goes with the last one. Yeah. Let's really take this time to, my parents don't live here, and they're in the age group, right? So that's at risk. So we just need to be intentional to build those. But then my daughter's home. We're quarantining here for a couple of weeks. She lives in Chicago, and so I really want to not miss that opportunity as well. Even though there's tension to work and try to scrap and make some things happen, I have to turn the phone off from time to time and really prioritize those relationships. I can't let the stress of this situation cause me to miss the people around me. And then the fourth.
And Bob, just real quick, just to interject, I think that goes back to your first point as well, is empathy. Right now, people don't need to be sold. People just, we have people now working from home that have never worked from home before. There are people who are used to being out and about, and if they're not going out to events, they're at least in an office where they're surrounded by people. And so now we've got people who are isolated, trying to figure out new tools and processes. And the other thing that's I think is important too, and you mentioned this, not only family relationships, but it's an opportunity to connect with our customers, to connect with other people in the community, maybe at a different level. People are looking for that. So I think for any of us in any sort of leadership role, we've got to be intentional. How do we connect? How do we serve the people around us? And there is sort of that tension. You mentioned this earlier between, I feel like I'm in survival mode to some degree. So when that happens, we immediately go inward, which is just how our brains are wired. And yet sometimes serving someone else can be exactly what we need to help lift them up. And in response, it helps us as well.
Yeah, that's such a big point, because plenty has been written even this week on leadership, right? But if we're leading our people, now is not the time to be passive and not engage with them and not ask them what they're struggling with. And, I didn't want to bother you while you were at home. No, care for them, right? Mm-hmm. It's a time to invest personally and to try to just be positive, to truly try to have that positive countenance. This too will pass. So that's a good point, Steve.
I think there's some creative ways that perhaps we can help people that may not be our typical thing that we do. For example, just as people who were never meant to do their job online are trying to figure out how to do their job online. For example, I have young children, and 2 of them receive both speech and occupational therapy. These are services that need to be provided in person at all costs. However, are at the expense of shutting down entirely, our brilliant therapists are innovating ways to take their services online. Like, that might be something that a parent of a kid could say, oh, hey, you know what, Mike, I do a different kind of business, but I know how to help you with this. I think there's that sense of goodwill and just we're in this together, that ultimately that investment in important relationships leads to other opportunities down the line as you invest in people. And I think that that's a way we can think outside of the box during this time.
Yeah. It almost, this is a never the same again moment, right? And so with some of the opportunities and things that have been coming to me, I will have relationships on the other side of this that I never would have had otherwise. And they look a little bit different. And so I just love that to not miss the moment, right? To connect with people and to see what could develop afterwards.
Well, and I think too, from right now, and I'm thinking about this from a business perspective, it's the question a lot of business owners and leaders have is, how do I continue to try to move my business forward? How do I continue to try to market and sell? And right now, I think the biggest thing is approaching people with empathy. If we approach people with that salesperson perspective, or sort of the traditional salesperson, then that's not going to work. I got an email this morning. It was like, hey, are you having to work it? It was from an office supply chain, one of the chain stores. And it was, hey, are you stuck working at home? Get 19% off. I mean, maybe it wasn't 19%. So, but it was, get such and such % off. And it just, I don't know, it felt opportunistic. It didn't feel like it was genuinely serving. And maybe others didn't take it that way, but I think it's right now, empathy, connecting with people at a personal level, even just picking up the phone, calling people and say, hey, I don't know if you need what I offer, but I just want to let you know I'm here if you have questions, or if I can be of service in some form or fashion. Because if we can help people, we just need to approach those conversations with tact, with empathy, and putting their interests first, which we should be doing that anyway, but it's especially needed now.
Especially when it's easy to feel desperate. Right. We're going to have to trust the process through this.
Yeah. We cannot approach people out of desperation, because then that is purely self-serving. And that's going to, in the long term, that will be more detrimental to our business than planting seeds that have the potential to, again, if we can help them, maybe it's just some free advice right now. Maybe it's a 30-minute conversation. But in the long term, that can help, establish, it shows that we're interested in them. It positions us as a guide who can help them face their problems.
Yeah.
I just saw a question come in, and it's something that we talked about just a minute ago. And it was a question relative to the comments made recently that maybe our nation will be returning to work sooner rather than later, while still practicing safe social distancing. And we were talking about how to plan in that tension of doing what we can today, but also planning for a very uncertain future. Bob, could you just share some of your thoughts and your ideas about how to live in that tension?
Yeah, absolutely. There is this need to, okay, I want to be diligent, right? Even though sometimes it's hard when you don't have your normal structure to come and bring your best, maybe. We could err anywhere from that to like, I'm scrambling and I'm on the computer for 12 hours a day and missing everything around me. So focusing on what I have control of is big, right? And so these are the things that we're focusing on. These are things that I do have control on. But regarding time, that's what's so uncertain here. Is, if uncertainty creates anxiety. So if I want to shift from this place of uncertainty to certainty, what I certainly have control of is the next 24 hours. And so my approach has been, when I go to bed at night, have I done wise things to do today? Have I thought through today and the future and done everything I can do today to make today my masterpiece? Can I just make today my masterpiece? That's the only time we have control over. That's the only time we can predict is the next, 6 or 8 hours before we end the workday. And so that's been my response to that, not knowing otherwise, when we should get things going. But emotionally, if I've done everything I can do today to prepare for tomorrow, and to be responsive and adding value to the world around me today, then that sets me best up for whenever we do get to go back.
I think a lot of people are hoping things go back, but we should probably not think that way. I don't know. What do you think? Like, what should our mindset be?
Wow.
How much time do we have?
Well, and that depends matters, right? That depends. If I have a hair salon and I'm not seeing anybody right now, go back becomes pretty important. I can't wait until I go back and I have a mortgage. But we did talk about how can we be creative, right? Again, Churchill, let's not let a good crisis go to waste. For some people, this will be a bit of a pivot. Maybe it's tapping into some old connections or looking into some other opportunities with some of these businesses and needs that are growing around us and saying, hey, I'm going to start a different kind of side focus for a little bit. And that's working for, a lot of people. Some people need to keep holding the line, but maybe we need to hold loosely what work needs to look like for us in some context over the next little bit. Does that make sense? Does that sound right?
Sure.
Yeah. And I think a big part of mindset is I saw something on LinkedIn about this earlier, that really what's happening right now is we're going through the stages of grief to some degree,
right?
Because there's just been this huge shock to our system, individually, as families, as local communities, as a culture. And so we've never been told, at least in my lifetime, we've never been sheltered in place, which that goes into effect for Memphis and Shelby County today, and other states have done that statewide. And so part of what's happening is just there's this initial processing of what's happening and all the emotion that goes with that. There's anger and anxiety and fear and what's going to happen and all those kinds of things. And for Rusty's question of when do we go back, that's a great question, and I no idea. And I think we'll see that maybe in phases. China is now starting to return to some sense of normalcy. And people are going out to restaurants and there's still a conscientiousness of staying, sort of maintaining healthy distance. And so I think as a nation, once that happens, I think we'll go back to some of that pretty quickly. But for now, I think you're absolutely right, Bob. We've got to look at what can I do today? And I go back to, and this was something I was thinking about and praying about this morning when I was up at 4 a.m. It's Jesus told his disciples, he told his followers in the Sermon on the Mount, he said, don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow has enough worries of its own. And so if I try to solve tomorrow's problems with today's resources, then it's always going to be out of balance. It's always going to be a deficit. And so I think part of the encouragement too is, we've got to look at what can I do today? Stephen Covey talks about this in the 7 Habits, is the circle of influence and the circle of concern. Well, the circle of concern are these things out here, whereas the circle of concern is a smaller circle, and those are the things that I can influence today.
Yeah, good stuff, Steve.
And so we've got a couple more comments here, and Bob, I want you to get to your last point, and then we'll start to wrap up. So Rusty says, I'm almost to the point of where you have to resume some sort of normalcy of operations while being safe as possible, or there could be nothing to return to. Rusty, it is. I think, and I'm glad I'm not a government leader, because those are tough decisions between, trying to determine what to do to try to minimize the impact of everything, and at the same time, making sure that it doesn't just completely annihilate our economy and people's livelihoods. And so, man, there's so question from David Harris: what platform is best for communicating with our remote partners and employees? Zoom. We're big proponents of Zoom. Been using that for years, and there's a lot of really great things about that platform. So I would highly recommend that. Bob, yeah.
Yeah.
Bob, why don't you go ahead and wrap us up with your point number 4 that you had in your post?
Sure. Point 4 was invest in getting better, right?
Okay.
It's to not just live in the crisis, but to carve out time to invest to improve. And here's, we're learning a lot about ourselves at this time. We're learning about how we're built. We're learning about our choking point. We're learning these things. And one way to maximize that is to spend time reflecting on what you're learning about yourself. You're just really, okay, where are these things I need to develop in, right? And then, kind of the person of faith is I can grow in a crisis by changing the way I respond to the crisis. I can choose to have hope. I can choose to have faith. I can choose to increase my choking point. When you think about it, the difference between the best athletes and the average athletes, or the really good ones, is their emotional choking point. It's that how can they stand in there when the stakes are high? Mm-hmm. And we can't increase our choking point or raise that unless we're thinking about the fact that we have one. Right. So if I'm in crisis, we think about that. If you think of a Tiger Woods coming back from when he was on his game from 11 strokes to win a Masters, that's a mental game. So if I say, hey, this is an opportunity for me to get stronger. This is an opportunity for me to get braver. This is an opportunity for me to not let fear rule me. If I have that mindset and I'm thinking that way, I can get better. And I think on the other side of this, we're going to need a telescope to look back and see who we used to be.
Yeah, that's right.
If we respond that way, instead of honestly letting it take us down a totally different path. Because I see people panicking and basically we are victims, right, of the coronavirus. But as soon as I delegate power of my life to the coronavirus, then I lose. We have to maintain that agency and that local control. And so focusing on how we can grow is my answer to that, Steve. Last point.
Okay. Well, and so we just had a comment come in from Sally Whitehorn. She's with the MBJ, but her comment was that one of her casino clients is working at home on the reopening strategy, from advertising to messaging to special events. And just her comment is, it seems like a great way to regain control.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really good point. I think it is, again, we kind of go back to that idea of right now, some people are still just processing and trying to get arms around the collateral damage. So I think there's probably a little bit of a moment for people to get to that place where they can start viewing things more optimistically. I heard somebody say the other day, it's okay to retreat to advance. And so sometimes it's okay. Give yourself permission to be able to step back, catch a breath, sort of grieve it, but don't stay there. Look for the opportunities. And I had a call with a business owner yesterday, and he said, it's kind of like stock racing. If there's a wreck on the track, the pace car comes out and everybody slows down, and you have all the cars stacked up behind the pace car. And he said, that's what I feel like this is right now, is it's a time to reset and kind of reposition so that when we do come out of this, and we will, that we're in a position to really launch out.
And take it as an opportunity to re-envision things as well. Just to totally ask, what could it be, right, in the world that we're going to see?
Absolutely. Well, guys, this has been a great conversation. I want to just very quickly, Bob, you are working on a resource. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and where people can go to find it?
Yeah, I'm just writing a mini ebook on finding certainty at work and in life. When we have an uncertain world, I'm putting some points together to help do that. And it's the principles will go beyond a crisis, but they're very relevant in a crisis because so many of the things we place certainty in, we don't have right now. So what does a response look like? Since as humans, we need some degree of certainty, right? And that we're working on that. That should be available this week or next. And
Okay.
if they want to have me send that to them once it's finished, just go click on that link at that website, and then we'll get it to you when it's available.
Okay. So that's potentialresults.com/finding-certainty. And so like Bob said, please go there, drop in your email address, and he'll get that out. I know that's going to be good. So any closing thoughts, Bob or Annie Laurie?
Annie Laurie?
Go ahead.
Sure. I think I have to say that, again, this rock that we're all living on is traveling through space right now at 67,000 miles an hour. But literally, that's how fast we're traveling through space around the sun. And we're not flying off, right? So it's amazing. So at some point, I need to find time in my day to say, God, I've done what I've done all day, and I've done what I have control over. And now I'm going to put it in your hands. Now I'm going to trust you, just like you keep us in orbit. I'm going to trust you with some of these things that I don't have control over, and to find peace that way. I don't see any way through this without that.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Laurie, any closing thoughts?
No, but tune in Friday so we can talk about the marketing perspective of these things.
Absolutely.
Definitely have some things we can share through the lens of marketing, and feeling like Sally was mentioning, that sense of control you can get back when you start to plan for the future. So I think we'll have some ideas we can share about that later.
Absolutely. And so thank you to everybody that's joined us today, those that'll join us the recording. And like Annie Laurie said, our goal is to do two things. One, it's to encourage you, and it's to equip you. We want you to have a sense of hope, to have that sense of, hey, here are some things that I can do. There's all these things I can't control, but here are the things I can do. We want to help you focus on those and give you ideas and resources to do that. So again, on Tuesdays, we're going to focus on navigating business. Fridays at noon, same bat channel, same bat station, all that stuff. We're going to talk about marketing. And this upcoming Friday, we're going to talk about how do you market now. We're really going to focus on how to understand what your customers and what your prospects need now. And a lot of it has to do, we talk a lot about story, and we're going to focus on your customers, the hero of the story. What do they need right now? Because what they need right now is a lot different than it was 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And so our marketing, our messaging, all of those things need to shift. And a lot of the things that we talked about today, empathy, connecting with people at a relational level, those are absolutely essential. And so we want to talk about how we can help. How can you position yourself as a guide? How can you position yourself through your messaging and your tactics as that guide who helps your customer? And it's one of those things too. It's a long-term perspective, because depending on who your customers are, it might not be an immediate impact. But we want to take that long-term view. We want to take that strategic perspective that what you do now can do a lot to position you for when things start improving, that then all of a sudden your business just booms. So join us Friday at noon. Thanks again for everybody who's joined us. Thank you for the questions and the comments. Bob, thank you. Annie Laurie. Now I'll share this one comment from Sally. Thank you, Sally. We really appreciate that. Glad you could join us. And one more thing I'll post. If you have questions for us, if there's anything that you would like us to cover on Wayfind Marketing Live, please get in touch with us. My email address is on the screen, steve@wayfindmarketing.com. Would love to hear from you. And man, we hope it's a great day for you guys. And thanks again for joining us. Have a fantastic day working from home.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.